Hey, I'm Pat, and in this video we'll be going over the difference between the server and the client and how to use local scripts, pretty much. So basically the first thing I want to go over is what is like the server and what is the client, because I see like a lot of people don't completely understand what the server is, what is the client, and why you can't get local player on the server. So basically, whenever there's a Roblox game, right, there's multiple servers per game, right? Like each game has a server, and here I'll show you like here's Bloxburg, right? So this is just an example. What the fuck? All right, this is just an example. So we go to the servers, right? And it shows us a list of all the servers in Bloxburg, right? So these are all different servers. So you can see each server has multiple players in it, right? So you see we have 12 of 12, so there's a maximum of 12 players per server. So each server has multiple players. Alright, so there's one server, and then all those players are connecting to that server and using that server, right? So there's only one server per like group of players. And when you're editing your studio, you can kind of think of you're pretty much customizing the template for the server. So whenever the server runs, it will use pretty much what you made in studio to it will use that on the server pretty much. So everything here would be like one server. You can kind of think of it like that. And now a client is basically just a personal computer, right? It's just a computer. So server would be just one computer, but there can be multiple clients per server. And a client would just be like a computer, like your own computer. A player would be using their computer, right, to connect to the server and play on the game, basically. So what was I trying to say? So that's pretty much how it works, right? So the computer is owned by the player. So there's a client and there's multiple clients, and then there's the server. So there's only one server per server, obviously, right? So a server cannot necessarily belong to a player. So you can't use local player on the server. You may not know what local player is when you're watching this video, but that's okay. We're going to go over that later in the video. But you can't use local player on the server because the server, there's only one server and it doesn't belong to any player necessarily, right? So the next thing would be a local script, right? So what is a local script? In all my previous videos, I've been using this script. Some people call it like the normal script, but really the way you should refer to this kind of script is a server script. So this is actually a server script. And you see, usually you're going to put in server script service. That's usually where you're going to store your server scripts, but you might put them in other places sometimes depending on what exactly you're doing. But you can see once you type in script here, there's three kinds of scripts. There's also this script called local script. So what is a local script? A local script, basically, it belongs to a client. Each client will have its own set of local scripts, pretty much. There's only one server, like one kind of server script per server. Like this server script, there will only be one of this server script for each server. But say if we have a local script inside of starter player scripts, every time a player joins, they'll get a copy of this local script, and it will then belong to them. And local scripts are also actually stored on a player's computer in their own memory. So a player actually has full ownership over the script, which is how exploiters exploit. You know, they can add local scripts to their memory. They can modify current local scripts because the local scripts are stored on their computer completely, right? So a local script, pretty much, it belongs to a player. It belongs to a client, and there's only certain areas where the script can run because it needs to belong to a player in order for it to run. So now I'm going to go over the different locations where a server script runs. So obviously starter player scripts is one of them. I used as an example, right? But I'm going to go over like more of a reason as to why this location actually works for a local script. So you can see we have starter GUI, starter pack, starter player. And the thing about all three of these is whenever a player joins the game, all the instances under these services, I guess you can call them. I think they're considered services, I guess, right? So all the instances under these will actually be pretty much cloned or duplicated or replicated, as you know, like the big fancy word would be replicate. Basically, those instances are replicated and they are stored inside of the respective spot inside of a player, right? So starter GUI, all the GUIs in here would be pretty much cloned and stored under the player's player GUI. So we're just gonna make a GUI here and we're just gonna call it test, so that way we know that this is our GUI we made. And then we can also make a local script here called client script or whatever, right? So all this under starter player, you have starter character scripts and starter player scripts. Starter player scripts, all of the scripts under here pretty much will be cloned or replicated and stored under the player's player scripts, and the character scripts will be replicated every time the player dies, pretty much, or the character dies, because whenever the player dies, their character gets destroyed and a new one is made. But every time a character is created, the scripts from the starter character scripts will be replicated and put under the character. So I'll put a script in here as well for an example. And then the last one will be starter pack, which is usually where you're going to store like your tools. And local scripts work for tools as well, because a tool will usually belong to a specific player. So we're just going to call this test tool. So now once we play the game, you'll see once we play up here in the player service, we can see our player. So this is our player right here underneath the player service. And we can just view the Explorer while we're testing, right? And we can see our backpack, and you can see the test tool was actually cloned to our backpack. And now we have our own version of the test tool. And you can see the starter pack still has the test tool on it, but this isn't the one that we actually own. It's the one in the backpack. This one actually belongs to us. And then you see we also have our player GUI, our own set of GUI. And inside here we have our test GUI that we made. And inside player scripts we have our client script they made. You'll see some other scripts and stuff in here. This is all like default Roblox stuff that Roblox adds once the game's created. But we can also go under workspace and see our character, which has the same name as our player. And you can see our client script too was parented to our character once we join the game as well. So the way local scripts work pretty much is they belong to a specific player, and they'll only run once if they belong to a player, right? Something to take into note is that there's only one workspace per server, right? There's only one lighting per server, only one server script service, one server scripts, one server storage. I don't know about replicated first and replicated storage. I was gonna look that up before I started recording, but I forgot. But it's not too important. You can look it up on your own if you want. But the reason I'm saying this is because there's only one workspace, so the workspace actually belongs to the server, and you can't run a local script under workspace unless it belongs to a character, like we just showed, right? Because the character is actually owned by the player's client. I'm not going to get too into detail with that, but the character is actually owned by the player, so not by the server. So any changes the player makes to their character will be seen by the server pretty much. But so I'm just going to make an example here real quick. So we're going to make a part here, and we're going to have a click detector inside of it. I'm going to make sure this part's anchored. Oh, they fixed the check marks. That's nice. How nice of them. So we're going to add a local script to our part. Just for an example. Right. And we'll print 1 once this part is clicked. So we'll go ahead and view our output, and we'll play, right? Oh yeah, I have like 20 scripts that are going to print hello world, but don't worry about that. So you'll see we click this and nothing actually happens. And we don't even have errors in the output. Roblox decided to not tell you that you're screwing up when you do things like a local script in workspace, but you can see local scripts do not work in workspace like this because that's not how they work, right? But if we go into, say, starter player scripts, and instead we can make a reference to our part that's in workspace, workspace.part, and then we can reference our click detector and listen on the mouse click event with our connect and connect it to the function, right? And now if we print 1 once it's clicked, you'll see that now it works. We can click it as many times and it'll work because the local script belongs to our player. And we can still reference parts that are like in workspace or things, but the scripts has to be parented to a certain location for it to work properly, right? It has to belong to a player. So I guess I could have kept running just to show you an example. So the next thing I want to go over is the difference between like server and client changes. So you'll see we have a part right here, and right now we can actually take our part and say if we want to make it a different color, we can make it like blue or something. And right now we are editing the game on the client, like we're viewing it from the client. If we want to change that, we can click test up here, and then you'll see this current client here. It shows like a computer. If we click that, it'll actually switch us over to the server. And now you'll see something very interesting happen. Once we switch over to the server, you can see this part's no longer blue. Even though we just made it blue, it's not blue on the server. Now the reason this is this is actually called like filtering enabled pretty much. And the reason this works like this is because it kind of prevents exploiting. Exploiters can't like modify parts, and it can't like be seen by other players, right? It kind of prevents exploiting. So if another player was here, they wouldn't actually be able to see that this part is blue. They'd see it just like this, that it's gray. Because any changes that are made on the server will be seen by all clients in the server. But if a specific client changes something, then all the other clients will not see that change. Unless they're like changing the character because they have network ownership over the character. But like I said, I'm not going to discuss that, but it's okay. So now if we want to go ahead and make this part like green or something, and now we go back to the player, you'll see now it's green, right? And if we were to like, we can move this part around and do whatever we want with it, but the server will not see the changes that we are making, right? Because now it's still here. Even though when we're playing, we can see the parts over here, and we can actually still click it. Kind of, right? We can still click it. But the server still thinks the part's over here. Well, it knows it's over here. This part is still over here, but our client thinks that the part's over there because we moved it on the client pretty much. So hopefully that makes sense as to the difference between client and server changes. Oh, and one more thing I want to show you. You'll see that we can look inside replicated storage. We can look inside replicated first, but you'll see we can't actually look inside a server script service or server storage. It's not just because there's nothing in them right now. I think there is something inside a server script service, but it's because the client cannot actually see inside of these. It doesn't have access to them because these two locations are owned by the server. So if we switched over to the server, you'll see now we can see inside a server script service, and now we can see the scripts that are in there. But the client can't see anything in there because it doesn't have the permissions to see inside them pretty much. So, however, something like replicated storage can be accessed by the client. So that's the reason there's two different storages here, right? Because replicated storage can be used as a place to store things that can be accessed by either the client or the server. But if you want something to be restricted to only the server so other clients can't like access it or change it or get it or whatever, right? Then you'll store it in server storage so that way only server scripts can see it and only server scripts can make changes to it or use whatever is stored inside of it, right? So I pretty much did enough explaining as far as how everything works in this video. but I kind of want to get into like writing some proper scripts and explaining what exactly a local script is, and like why a local script is a thing, and like how you can use it to do things. So the whole purpose behind a local script is because since it's owned by a client, since a specific player owns it, we can actually do a lot of things inside of it to use it. So one of the main things that a lot of people like to misuse is using local player. So I'm just gonna make a players variable, and what we'll do is get our player, and you'll see that now we can do a local player, and this is only in local scripts. Do not ever use this in a server script. This will never work inside of a server script. Please don't do that. I swear to God, don't do that. If you do that, don't say that. Don't even mention my name if you do that. All right, just don't do this inside of a server script. But this will always work inside of a local script. Local player is only able to be used inside of a local script. And that's because obviously the script belongs to a certain player. So that way, so inside of the script, you can get the player that owns the script, pretty much. So say when we join the game, we will own a copy of this script, and we will be able to get the local player inside the script because we own the script, right? That should make sense, I hope. So we can print like our player.name once we join the game. View output. Once we press play, you'll see it prints out our name, our username, ghost 6HYST, some weird ass spelling for ghost, but whatever. So that's how that works. Another thing about local scripts that make them very useful is they're good for detecting user input. So things like GUI, or like detecting keyboard or mouse input, like if you want to figure out where the player's mouse is, or them pressing a certain button on their keyboard, or like them putting like text into a GUI or pressing a GUI button, or things like that, would all be done inside of a local script, because a local script will belong to the player, and it can detect things like keys being pressed on a keyboard and mouse being clicked, whatever, right? You can't detect those things on the server because the server script won't belong to a player necessarily, right? So that's pretty much the benefit of using a local script. I'm not going to go over the specifics of like detecting key input and like using GUI. Those are going to be in future videos or whatever, but just for now, that's how a local script works. That's the difference between server and client. If you have questions, you can comment or ask questions, whatever, and I'll answer. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully this helps. Bye.